So we got game ranks again. 10 biggest gaming disappointments over the last 10 years. Let's see this, because I know a few that'll be on there.
The gaming world, as great as it is
I know a
often
few.
filled with a lot of disappointments. So today, we're taking a look back at the last
I love
10
game
years
ranks.
and talking about some of the biggest disappointments. This isn't a list of like the worst games ever made or anything, but games that just genuinely disappointed us for one reason or another. There's going to be plenty of disagreement and stuff, so we're looking forward to hearing from you in the comments. But we got 10 games, so let's get started.
Oh, what's this guy's name?
Because
really I listened to him before.
It's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice 2024. Now, this is kind of a dead horse.
Suicide Squad?
At this point. We've talked about it a lot on this channel.
Well, I saw this one coming.
Unfortunately, it just felt too forced into a games as a service model, and it kind of lost a lot of the magic touches that Rocksteady, the developers' previous games had, with like stuff like the Batman Arkham series. It had an unfulfilling story, some cool gameplay concepts and traversal, but ultimately boring missions and enemy types, and frankly, it was pretty repetitive, despite the fact that the game was technically designed around keeping you playing endlessly. It released a new season, or the start of the season, with Joker content and updates, and
the hell Joker is that?
Really grab us either, as much as we wanted to give it a shot. Now, in hindsight, I know it's easy for people to say like, oh, well, you saw the gameplay trailers, you saw that it was kind of going to be this always online microtransaction games as a service type thing.
Your predictability will be your downfall, Harkness.
So what are you expecting? Why are you disappointed? Well, frankly, again, we're still just disappointed because the developers' previous games were just so good. You
That's
had
true.
to be there for the launch of Arkham Asylum, man.
Great game.
That came out of nowhere, and it was incredible. And it only went up from there with Arkham City and Arkham Knight. So this just feels like such a jarring shift into something that was just so painfully disappointing. Again, at this point, like, we've talked it to death. I think a lot of people on YouTube have, to be frank. So with that, let's move on. Because over at number 9, we have another thing that was talked to death, certainly on YouTube and Twitch. It's The Day Before.
Oh my God, I remember watching the trailer.
Go like, yeah, no duh, you were disappointed. What did you expect?
But we knew.
A lot of people were speculating that it was a scam or it wasn't a real game, and sure. But there was that first trailer. That first concept trailer that showed...
The first trailer looked great.
A mix of The Division, some multiplayer and like Tarkov type stuff, mixed with The Last of Us.
And then you watched the gameplay trailer, and you
Even
knew.
if it was a little too good to be true, we still couldn't help but hope for something good. And ultimately, The Day Before was absolutely a mess. It was clearly underbaked and underfunded and just totally half-assed and had none of the original ideas it presented. It just threw like every single gameplay concept at the wall, but didn't really finish any of them. And there was so much to it, with essentially it getting taken down, the developers kind of talking smack. Like, it was such a mess. But the reason why I'm pointing this out is
it was shut down the day after the release.
The Day Before was a huge disappointment for a lot of people. Maybe
it looked like a great game.
Fans, because don't forget, this was one of the most wish-listed games on Steam. Like, it was top of the charts. There was anticipation for this. It piqued people's interest.
It piqued
Maybe
mine.
not the people who read gaming news and social media every single moment of every single day, but a lot of people on Steam saw this and went, oh, cool. I'm wishlisting that. I want to play that. And then this game just came out and was gone in like 3 days. So there were a lot of people out there, I think, that were disappointed. Those who didn't really follow along with what the hell was going on.
I didn't. I had no idea. I had people on my YouTube section in my comments saying
this is higher on the list.
It's not. It's a scam. It's not real.
We're pretty skeptical, but still, it's a funny one to talk about. Some of the glitches from this game when it released are hilarious. Anyway, let's move on. Next, over at number 8, we have the Callisto Protocol from the end of 2020.
Callisto Protocol, I heard, was really good though,
and kind of for a lot of people looked to be like the next big thing, the return of Dead Space, a spiritual successor to Dead Space.
Good job, Last.
Specifically because it was headed up by Glenn Schofield with a new studio. He was one of the original people behind Dead Space. So
great game, by the way.
This seemed like a good cinematic third-person.
Callisto Protocol wasn't good. My friend played it and called it mid.
Unfortunately, It released.
Well,
and it
Dan
was
called
by no means
Dan,
worst
the
game.
Welshman.
I
He
absolutely will defend.
played it and he
But
swore by
it was
it.
not the next big thing. It was a little disappointing with how the game kind of ended, and it was a little short, and just feels.
He said it was a little iffy, but it was
the melee
pretty
wasn't
good.
too solid. The gameplay not as compelling as we'd hoped. Certainly not as engaging as its grandfather, Dead Space. That's for sure. It definitely had some incredible, almost jaw-dropping visuals and a few good
Looks
moments.
great. Looks fantastic, actually.
But ultimately, frankly, it just wasn't very memorable. And I think that's a damning thing on its own. Again, it's not the worst game in the world. It does have some fans. But when it released, it was a full-price game. It was pretty short, and it just wasn't quite as cool as we were hoping. I would still...
I didn't play the remake, but I played the
Before
originals.
we buy, I would like
All
to
of the
see what it kind
originals.
expands on things. I don't know if we're ever going to get that, but for now, that's where this is at. Now, next over at number 7, 2022, saw no shortage of disappointments because this one is the Saints Row reboot. Now,
Oh
I know
my
this
God,
is
I
another
played
one
that
where people could have
recently.
looked at it and said, that doesn't look that great. But the disappointment is that it's
Yeah,
the Saints
I would say so.
franchise, which really was at its peak for quite some time, and this was the last gasp of the franchise, to be frank. That's the biggest disappointment, is that Saints Row went out with a whimper with this game. After this, Volition, the studio behind stuff like Red Faction and all the original Saints Row games, were kind of shut down and absorbed into a larger company, and it's a damn shame, because the Saints Row reboot just doesn't really have any...
It was all right.
life
It was...
in it. It feels like
Nah.
a game that tried to appease everyone. That tried to make
Everyone.
all fans of the series happy. The people
Yeah.
who like the crazy, over-the-top shenanigans of the newer games,
Yep.
and the people who like the gang warfare GTA
Of the
kind
older
stuff
games.
of the earlier games.
Yeah.
And by trying to please everybody, it felt like it just had no focus in its direction and ended up just being this lifeless, kind of forgettable game.
It was, I just remembered it from watching this, so yes, I'd say forgettable would be the correct term. I played the whole thing.
Felt like it had nothing to say, nothing to do, and the biggest, most damning thing is that it just wasn't fun. Oh, not to mention the fact that it was also glitchy. Like, it was
Super glitchy.
mess. It was another game that did not have enough time in the oven. That's a whole other thing. We could talk about that with a lot of games, but yeah. Saints Row Reboot was, again, just the dying last gasp of a once great franchise, and that is massively disappointing, dude.
Yeah.
Next over at number 6, we have Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite from 2017.
That one was
Hey,
okay.
do you remember Marvel vs. Capcom's new game, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite?
I
no,
remember
you probably
it.
Don't,
I played
because
it.
it very quickly
Played it against Pud.
disappeared into the ether. I don't really know what it was.
We
with
played
this
it
one.
once,
There
and
was
we
some
never played it
controversy
again.
before the game launched. Some people making fun of the game's DLC, the content, the special edition stuff with it. There was a lot to it, and then when the game released, it just kind of didn't take off. It didn't take the world by storm.
I didn't play the story of it, though.
Because the older Marvel vs. Capcom games were incredible. But this just felt like a massive misstep for Capcom. Capcom, who, to be totally honest, has been doing a pretty good job lately and really
They
kind
have
of
been.
giving the fans what they want and making the right moves. But there were a few years, many years ago, where Capcom was just slipping up left and right. And it kind of feels like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was one of those last big slip-ups before they finally got their shit together, got a good head on their shoulders. Unfortunately, it was the one that had to die on the sword. And I haven't really thought about it since I just mentioned it in this video.
Right.
So with that, let's move on.
In a
Next
long
over at number
time.
5, we have Redfall from 2023.
Yeah, that one was bad.
Man. I mean, yep, another one that's beating a dead horse. But
Yeah, that
in more
one's
recent
awful.
years of the last 10 years, there's a lot of disappointments. And Redfall was a massive one. It felt
Yeah.
unfinished. It was a technical mess. Absolutely buggy, but most importantly, the game just was missing the fun factor. It didn't have an interesting or compelling loop
At
It
all.
just felt like this weird shoehorned co-op game.
Yeah, for
that
real.
didn't take advantage of what the developers were good at. This is Arcane, the creators of the Dishonored games and Deathloop. So they know what they're doing. They have the sauce, but with Redfall, they did not have it at all. We still don't really know what the hell happened with this one, and that is the biggest disappointment. It's Arcane making a bad game. it absolutely stings. Now, Deathloop is a game that has some people that really love it and some people that
I
don't.
really like
And
Deathloop
that's
that
fine.
much.
But with their follow-up game, Redfall, man, this is like inarguably fun.
Deathloop
Nobody liked this
was
one.
better
It was
than
pretty much dead
Redfall.
on the
I'll be
vine.
honest
There were
about
some
that
good
one.
Ideas, you could see why they decided to make the game at some point, but something got lost in translation, and that was a bummer. And we're still really sad about it because we just want them to make Dishonored 3 or a new Prey or something, please.
Dude, Prey. That's
Next over at
another
number
one.
4, we have
Jesus.
Cyberpunk 2077.
Tough game.
The original 2020 release, as you probably know.
Now, I
was
didn't
pretty
play.
bullish. You know, some people
I haven't
through the game
played
and still enjoyed
Cyberpunk.
it. But for a lot of people out there, the game was a technical mess.
It's good now, though, right?
Specifically, we remember because we played the PC version. And
What
it was,
the
you know, it
f-
was
was
all
that?
right. You know, it had some issues, and it still definitely was not ready for release. And you know, we're still holding CD Projekt Red's feet to the fire with that. But the biggest thing, the worst thing, were the console releases. The PS4 version, I remember specifically, was this blurry, muddy mess.
Oh,
It
yeah,
was a
that don't look
lifeless
good at
world
all.
with a bad frame rate and more
Holy crap.
glitches than you'd ever seen. Certainly more than the PC version, as far as I can remember. A lot of people documented this. You can look it up out there. It is absolutely rough and unacceptable. I still can't believe they released this game in this state for some people, and it really muddied the waters and, of course, the reputation of CD Projekt Red for a lot of folks. The PS4 version was so bad, it was actually delisted from the PSN store for a while.
Wow.
That is absolutely devastating.
Wow, I didn't know that.
I'm really glad that the game found its way. CD Projekt Red put their money where their mouth is, and they stuck with it and made it, frankly, a pretty awesome game. The game that some people saw in 2020. They made it that good for everybody, and then some. The expansions, the updates are all great. But that PS4 version was such a massive disappointment. What a mess, dude. Now, next at number 3, we have Babylon's Fall from 2022. Now, this game looked generic from the start.
Babylon's Fall? I've never even heard of this.
The biggest disappointment was the fact that it was Platinum Games that worked on it. The people behind so many games like Bayonetta, Nier Automata, Astral Chain, The Wonderful 101, Metal Gear Rising, Revengeance. I mean, these guys got it figured out. And Babylon's Fall felt like this weird game that Square Enix wanted them to make as like a live service thing, a weird co-op brawler with a lifeless, generic, uninspired world. Nothing even remotely close to the influences they've had in the past, just the sense of style, excitement, cool flashy combat. None of that was here, and the game was an absolute failure immediately because
I was going to say, I've never even heard of this one.
It's something that just didn't look exciting to anybody, and it was just so uninspired. It felt like something that they were obligated to do, and the game failed pretty much instantly. I understand every studio maybe has to take a contract gig from a bigger studio to make something to keep the lights on, but Babylon's Fall, man, that was really depressing. Now, next, down at number 2, we have Mass Effect Andromeda. This was a big one. I would say it was a disappointment.
I agree.
Specifically because of the
I didn't get to play Andromeda, but from what I heard, Andromeda was terrible.
They know how to make a good RPG, and I think they were so good at it that a misstep just felt like such a big miss. The original trilogy, the original
was
Mass Effect
amazing,
games were
fantastic,
so incredible. Some of the best sci-fi RPGs
Truth.
out there. That anything less than that with a follow-up just would hit even harder.
Absolutely.
And Mass Effect Andromeda was a gut punch for a lot of people. It does have its fans out there, but it just didn't feel like it was on the same level of quality as the previous games. From a storytelling standpoint, of course, it didn't really live up to that, but also from a technical level, the game was famous for a bunch of glitches and bugs, just an unacceptable thing to sell to people.
Yeah, that's what I heard about it.
But also disappointing in the sense that it just was nowhere near as memorable or compelling as those original games. You didn't get as many characters that really stuck with you here.
Yeah, dude.
Cool
I still remember all their names, bro.
Really remained in
You had Garrus and Rex.
BioWare was really great at, and still to this day, honestly, there's
all of them. Jack, Melinda.
Back up to that. I don't know if they
Or
ever
Miranda.
will,
I'm
but
sorry.
Mass Effect Andromeda in 2017 was kind of the beginning of the end in terms of just like a streak of disappointments. And now, finally, down at number 1, we have PT.
This is why I have trust issues when it comes to games.
We're
For real.
reaching back to the very end of the last 10 years, but
Say
we still think about
PT.
PT all the time. This was playable
That was.
teaser.
I thought that was the one
on the
that never
PlayStation
actually
Store
got
from
released.
Hideo Kojima and company.
Yeah.
That was a playable teaser that felt kind of like a first-person
Yeah, but it never
sci-fi
came
horror
out.
experiment. It was really cool, really unique.
I never got to play it,
The horror
unfortunately.
is definitely subjective, but it was very scary for a lot of people. The mood, the atmosphere, the pretty realistic graphics. This thing had it going on. It was
Yeah.
a small taste. It was experimental.
With lists and collecting good games. Well, you can always look at my list if you want to. I do the IGN playlist.
That it was the start of a new Silent Hill game called Silent Hills,
Yep.
featuring Norman Reedus from Walking Dead and Boondock Saints, among many
Yeah,
other
we got
things.
this teaser
And that
right
was
here.
just cool. This looked amazing. This felt amazing. But the biggest disappointment is that the Silent Hill or Silent Hills game, that this
PT's the greatest hit
never ended
game
up
never
releasing. It was
released.
canceled. There was so
Canceled.
much fallout and all weird behind the scenes business stuff with Hideo Kojima and his publisher Konami that something dropped out. Silent Hills was canceled.
Co
and
money.
PT was kind of erased from the internet. You can't access it, you can't download it through traditional means now, and they just totally tried to whitewash the whole thing, just totally erase it, and it's a damn shame.
It is a
That's
shame.
disappointing, is the fact that
I wanted to
Hideo
play
Kojima
that.
and team worked on something and made something cool, even if it was small and it didn't lead to anything. It just doesn't really exist anymore. That absolutely sucks. But hey, bad things like this happen in the game industry. What are you gonna do? So speaking of bad things happening, these were 10 disappointments from the last 10 years. There are definitely more out there, and you may disagree with some of these.
Oh, yeah,
choices,
this
so
one
let
was
us
a
know
bad
in the
one.
comments. We'd love to make a
What was the
part
name of that
because
damn
everybody
game?
has their own disappointment for one reason or another. We tried to find some unique angles to some of these, like I said, The Day Before and Callisto Protocol. So let us know what you guys are thinking in the comments with any of these.
Well, I
If you
agree
like
with the
this video
list.
And you like talking games with us every day, clicking the like button's all you gotta do. It really helps us out. And if you're new, maybe consider subscribing, hitting that notification bell, because we put out new videos every single day.
I'm already
As always,
subscribed. I'm giving
thanks
it a
for
like.
watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right, yeah, that was 10 biggest gaming disappointments over the last 10 years. Yeah, so I agree with the list, honestly. Definitely make good
just didn't
lists.
carry
So if you
on
haven't
Hill or
subscribed to Game Ranks, subscribe to Game Ranks on YouTube. Do it.